Hi there, this is Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is I'll Knit If I Want To, a little weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am wearing Ooey Gooey, which is this year's Rhinebeck sweater. Just released it this week on Tuesday. We are in the midst of kicking off all the things. The knit along starts soon, but I've already got the Ravelry forum open for you if you already want to jump in, say hello, introduce yourself, post pictures of your yarn if you've already got it. You can really start anytime. It officially kicks off in a week or so, but I think on the 26th. So it's a couple weeks for those ordering yarn and wanting to get all their stuff. But anyways, this is knit up in the Farmer's Daughter Fibers Spinster's Daughter yarn, which is a collaboration with Spin Cycle Yarns, and that is in this beautiful jammy colorway. And then it is Spin Cycle Yarns Dyed in the Wool, which this year I picked Dear Diary, which is a really subtle color shift, and I just love these colors together. This is not my typical color palette. I don't do a lot of purples, and I am just kind of in love. So it is knit from the top down. It's got some really fun couple little welts along the neckline and along the sleeves. Those were super fun to play with. And then this very kind of bold color work design. I was inspired by some rugs I was looking at, and they had these great undulating waves, and I thought, I bet I could chart that. So I drew up the charts, and then I got through that portion of the yoke, and I was like, you know, I just want a little something extra, and I did these dots, and I love how they look like these perfect round little drippy dots coming from this Ooey Gooey jammy yoke. So anyways, I'm so excited to finally have this out in the world. Would love to have you join the Rhinebeck Knit Along. Even if you are not coming to New York Sheep and Wool and Rhinebeck in the fall, you're more than welcome to join the Knit Along. We're gonna do some Instagram lives every month, and then we'll do a big in-person meetup at Rhinebeck for those who are attending. But there we go. So let's go ahead and jump into some questions. All right, question number one. The very first DRK pattern I knit was your Everyway Shawl. In fact, I knit two, one for myself and one for my sister. It's still one of my favorite shawls to wear after all these years. Thank you for the years of warmth and comfort I get from this shawl. I was wondering, what was the first pattern you designed for DRK, and what was your inspiration for creating it? So I got like a little pokey throat. First of all, I love that you're still loving your shawl. I just take the greatest pleasure in the things that I've made years ago that I'm still wearing or using all the time, or that I've given to loved ones, and see that they're still using it all the time. With how much time we put into the things we make, I just think it's really special when we can continue to cherish them for years to come. So I love that you enjoyed knitting it, not once, but twice. And I hope your sister still loves hers as well. So the first pattern I ever designed for Drea Renee Knits was actually, it's a little free pattern, and it's just a pair of thumbless little baby mitts. And I was just trying to get my bearings on, okay, how would I go about this if I wanted to try to start designing and releasing knitting patterns? So that is why I did that one. I was just trying to figure it all out. I put it out there for free. I learned how to use Ravelry, and kind of took off from there. After that, I did a pair of adult mittens called the Great Up North mittens, which are just, it's actually my favorite mitten shape. I actually have an idea for some mittens that are going to be a similar mitten shape that I'm hoping to release later this year. And they just have a cute little color work motif on them. That was the first time I ever did a naming contest. I did a naming contest on Instagram and gave away a pattern to anyone who helped me name it. And then right after that, I published Kingsley. So Kingsley was a hat that I designed for my father-in-law, and he is pretty sensitive to wool. But I found this wool alpaca blend at my local yarn shop, Woven Art, and that one didn't bother him so much. So every year we would pick a name for Christmas, and I had him. So I designed that little hat pattern for him. And that was when I started seeing some pattern sales, and that was kind of the kickoff of my designing career. So it's very fun to kind of take a little trip down memory lane. All right, question number 2. My question is specifically about Vellichor. I'm hoping to use some summer-friendly yarn for it, an alpaca, silk, and linen blend. I've done a little swatching, and with a US 3 needle, I'm spot on for stitch gauge. However, my round gauge is quite off. They're off by about 10 rounds. I measured after blocking the swatch. Would this cause any problems for me? I consider trying a larger needle, but I'm fairly certain that it would cause my stitch gauge to be off. I noticed the pattern mostly instructs to knit to certain lengths. It does. So that all seems fine. I think I'm most just worried about the sleeves, since I'd have more rounds than expected in that yoke area to then pick up for the little sleeves. Is there anything I should be worried about? Do you have any advice? So yeah, the nice thing about that pattern, stitch gauge, in general, most patterns are written with stitch gauge as the dominant piece of the puzzle. Row gauge becomes more important when you have to fit a specific pattern within a specific area. And that's where it can get a little tricky if your row gauge is way off. So for this, it really is not going to be a big deal for the body of your sweater. Honestly, for the sleeves, I also wouldn't overly worry because it's not even a full sleeve. Most of your little sleeve cap is actually coming from the body of the sweater because it's a drop shoulder. So it drops off your body and curls down your shoulder. So really the only sleeve you're picking up is the ribbing for the cuff. That's all there is. And you just need it to be a 5-stitch repeat. So as long as you do a multiple of 5 stitches for your pickup, you're gonna be fine. If you're worried about it being a little too big because you have to pick up more stitches to accommodate more rows, go down a couple extra needle sizes just to tighten up that ribbing a little bit. So I think you're going to be fine. One thing I did want to point out though, so your fiber content was alpaca, silk, and linen. The alpaca and the linen are gonna grow. So even though for your swatch, you did measure it post blocking, you're probably gonna see more growth in your finished garment than you did in your swatch because it's bigger. And it's gonna create, there's gonna be more weight due to gravity on the bigger garment than there was on that little bitty swatch. So I would actually consider, like when you do your body, maybe do a steam block or even a wet block and see how much it grows. Measure before you block it and then measure after. And then you'll know, okay, let me take that into consideration when I'm knitting the yoke, which is gonna determine how big your sleeve opening size is. I just don't want you to overcompensate too much for the difference in your row gauge and then have it grow a whole bunch and then end up with more length than you wanted. So I would consider blocking along the way, at least a steam block, to see if you're getting extra growth that you weren't anticipating. All right, next question. Andrea, you are so passionate about so many fiber crafts. I am. I was wondering if you ever dabbled in crochet or had a desire to. Are there any other crafts you enjoy besides fiber-based ones? So yes, I tried crochet back when I lived in New Zealand, and the creator of Stitch and Bitch, Debbie Stoller, came out with a crochet book, and I made a few items from there. Crochet never felt as intuitive for me. I struggled with my tension a lot. There's something about having a needle in each hand with knitting that helps me feel more balanced. When I crochet, it's like I would just get a little bit wonky, probably because I didn't give it enough time to fully develop my muscle memory and my tensioning. I do have a lot of curiosity about crochet, especially I would really, really love to do like a granny square blanket. I just think it would be really fun. I've been wanting to do one for years. I'm really inspired by Tipsy Tessie on Instagram. I will link her Instagram if anybody wants to check her out. She does the most beautiful crochet things. She does pillows, she does blankets. It's all this beautiful color palette of pinks and clays, and it's just gorgeous. So every time I see your stuff, I'm like, man, that looks so delightful. I really want to do it. So someday. I'm actually trying to kind of minimize my hobbies right now because it started to get to the point where it felt a little stressful because I was taking on too much. It's like I was trying to do knitting, sewing, weaving, spinning. I like to dabble in all the things. I also love to cook and bake and all that. So I finally was like, okay, let's prioritize these. And I still have dreams. I've been wanting to do this for years and I still have not done it. But I would really like to allot certain time blocks during my week to the different crafts that I want to have time to explore. And I think that would make it easier, because otherwise I feel like every day I'm going, okay, what am I going to prioritize today in this limited amount of time I have? But as far as non-fiber crafts go, sewing, it still feels like a fiber craft to me. Maybe some people would consider it a fiber craft, I don't know. But sewing would be my big one. I do love to sew, especially because it complements my knitting so well. I love having a totally handmade outfit. And also baking. So I used to be a pastry chef. I loved being a baker. I don't bake as much anymore, and there are times when I have little daydreams about starting a gluten-free bakery. We could really use one in my hometown. Especially we have a really big university here. I'm like, think about how many of these students have allergies. Like, come on, we need a place for people like me to go. We need a really solid, good coffee, bakery, cafe situation in town where you can get a salad, a sandwich, some yummy baked goods, some good coffee and tea. That would be a dream. I don't know when I think I'll have time for such an endeavor. If anybody else would like to move to town, and please open one for me, that would be great. But yeah, that's the other thing I love to do. I love to bake and cook as well. All right. How did you choose your tech editor? Did you look for certain qualifications? I am hoping to use my math degree and combine it with my passion for knitting, but I am curious what designers like you look for in editors. So this is kind of funny. I've shared the story of my tech editor before. I'm actually going to link a previous episode because she's been on here with me before a couple of years ago when I was in Oregon, which is where she lives. We did a little episode together. So I'll link that so you can see all about her. And she actually has a YouTube channel where she talks about tech editing. So if you're interested in that side of things, definitely go check her out. I will put her YouTube channel down here as well. So her name is Megan, and I actually met her in the beginning days of designing, and she is also a knitwear designer and happened to test knit one of my patterns. And you know what I expect from a test knitter is really just, did you find the pattern readable? And like, could you understand it? Was it easy to follow? And did you have fun? Did you like what you made? I'm not looking for anything else from a test knitter. I'm certainly not expecting them to catch any errors or continuity or anything like that. That's what a tech editor's for. Well, so Megan tested one of my designs and she came back with such good notes. And so I asked her, I was like, have you ever thought about tech editing? And would you want to be my tech editor? And so that is when our relationship was born. She helped me grade my first sweater, the white pine sweater, and is definitely just a real cornerstone of everything that I try to do here at Drea Renee Knits. Could not do it without her. And she really helps. She understands the way I'm trying to write my patterns. So that's really important to me. She understands the level of helpfulness I'm trying to include, the clarity, the continuity, sometimes better than I do. You know, it's so funny how, you know, I've been doing this for over 10 years. I'll be writing a pattern and all of a sudden I'll just change up this one little weird part of how I usually write something. And so she's great at catching stuff like that. But she also comes to the table with a lot of warmth and kindness and generosity towards knitters, and that's really important to me. And she's great at catching all the things. She's very detail oriented and I think math oriented. Maybe she would disagree, I don't know. But I think the way she thinks about things is really helpful as a tech editor. But anyways, you should definitely check out her channel because she does some interesting chats about it. All right. And I will also say, if you're trying to kind of get into tech editing and you're to the point where you want to try out editing some patterns for people, there are tech editor pools on Ravelry. So there's forums where you can kind of throw your hat into the ring to offer tech editing. And it tends to work out really great too when new designers and new tech editors compare up. I feel like Megan and I kind of built from the ground up with each other, and that has worked out really well for us. So. Okay, last question. I am currently knitting the ribbing for your weekender light. This is my first time using fingering weight yarn. I'm using a 4-ply superwash yarn with some nylon content. I have heard horror stories about superwash growing and growing and growing some more. Do you think I could turn the slip stitch faux seam on the front and back, and maybe add one to the sides, into a sturdier semi-seam to help keep things in place? It would look like a column of normal knit stitches rather than the beautiful line of slip stitches. Or does the nylon in the yarn or the number of plies make something like this unnecessary? I'm very nervous about my sweater growing and getting out of shape after I spend all the time knitting a fingering weight gauge. Sure. It takes a little more time to do something at a finer gauge like that. So I do think, just as you noticed and pointed out, you have a couple things on your side. The 4 plies are going to help. Hopefully they have a pretty nice twist in them. That can help with some growth. The nylon I can't really speak to. I've definitely seen a lot of superwash yarns that have nylon, and that doesn't necessarily help it not grow. It can help the strength of the yarn, which is why it's usually included. But what I would do is, hopefully you did a gauge swatch, and I would take that gauge swatch, and if you haven't already, because if you've already, it's a little late for this, but what I would do is I would measure it before blocking, and then I would block it. And then I would measure it again. And you can see, okay, did this grow a lot with blocking? That's gonna be your first clue. The slip stitch seams should actually help the stability of your sweater, along with the 3 needle bind off at the shoulders. Those are going to be some good stabilizing points. I don't know much about the other technique that you mentioned with your with the semi seam. I can't really speak to that. You could definitely try it, but I think that slip stitch seam might actually be enough. And I'm going to recommend what I said earlier for the person asking about Vellichor in question 2. I would go ahead and at least steam block the body of that sweater, or wet block it, throw it on some waste yarn, wet block it, measure it beforehand, and then measure it after it's dry. Do not measure it while it's wet. Measure it after it's dry. And see if you got a bunch of growth, because that's going to tell you, okay, maybe you want to tear back a little bit. Maybe it did grow quite a bit, or maybe it grew, but you're fine with that length, but now you don't want to do, you might want to take out a little bit of length in the yoke, because you know that's going to grow a little bit too. So that's really going to be the best way to know exactly what to expect. What you don't want to do is overcompensate for the growth you fear it might have, and then have it not have that growth. I just was using a yarn that has it has cotton and linen and alpaca and silk, and I thought I was going to see a lot of growth, and I didn't see any. So we don't really know. Sometimes we associate certain things, and where I've seen a lot of growth with superwash yarn is definitely from like an MCN, a merino cashmere nylon. Like, how soft is your yarn? When it's soft, you can tell even the skein is kind of floppy. Those are the ones that I find grow a lot. If it feels like it's got a pretty tight twist to the yarn and it doesn't feel super drapey like in the skein, then you might not have as much growth. But checking your swatch or checking it as you knit is really going to give you the best idea of how much growth to anticipate. So I would block the body and go from there. Even a steam block is going to help you start to see, okay, is this starting to stretch as I steam block? So that is what I would do. All right, I am going to add links below for this year's Rhinebeck sweater, Ooey Gooey. I will also put the link for the Ravelry forum for the knit along. I'll add, if not on this week's episode, I'm not sure when I'm going to get the link for the Facebook forum, but I'll add that next week's episode if I don't have it in time for this one. And the Instagram hashtag is just hashtag Rhinebeck Ooey Gooey Knit Along, and I've also put that below so you know how to spell it and everything. But thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. I hope you join us in the knit along, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.